as I'm sitting down with the President of the United States, Joe Biden. This is only possible because of all your love and support for the podcast and making us a platform that the president and his team felt was right to talk about mental health. This conversation is dedicated to the person behind the podium. I always want to get to know the human behind the title, behind the position, behind what they do in the world, and spotlight and shine a light on mental health. We talk about so many of the things that he's gone through in his personal life. I'm so grateful that I got to have this conversation that we're going to share with the world at large and make sure that mental health is a mainstream conversation because it's so integral to all of our lives. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you for all your love and support. It means the world to me. Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health and wellness podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every one of you that come back every week to learn, listen, and grow. Now, you know our mission here is to make the world happier, healthier, and more healed. And I believe that learning about people's stories of healing, of grief, of loss, of growth is a powerful way to do that. And today I've been graciously invited to the White House and I'm sitting with Mr. President. And I'm so grateful and honored to be here and to have you on our platform and for you to choose our platform to have this conversation. I couldn't be more honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm flattered you'd want to interview me.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive straight in. The first question I'd like to ask you is, what is your earliest childhood memory that you believe defines who you are today and the person you've become?
The earliest memory I have is, there's two of them. One is there was a bully in the neighborhood, lived down an area called the Plot, and we lived up a hill. And I was out with my friends in the alley behind our house, and my mother was at the pantry looking out. The tough guy in the neighborhood smacked me. He was a couple years older than me, and I came in holding my face. And my grandfather was at the kitchen table and said, "What's the matter, Joe?" And he said, "That's a shame." I walked in, and my mother said, "Joey, go back out there." So go back out there. She said, wait till he walks up to you. And as soon as he does, smack him right in the nose. She said, "I'll give you 50 cents if you do it." And I said, "Why, Mom?" She said, "You won't be able to walk in that alley again if you don't." I was scared to death. I walked out, popped him in the nose. It bled. He ran. And I thought,
It worked.
It worked. But and I think the lesson I learned the most, though, is I used to stutter badly. And I would talk like that. And then I'd catch my rhythm and be able to. And it was something that I thought was the worst curse could happen to me because everybody makes fun of it.
I had a similar experience with being bullied. So that resonates very strongly with me.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
I was the runt of the litter. No, I really was. I was a little guy, and I was a relatively good athlete even when I was a kid, but I literally was the runt of the litter.
Well, for me, it was my weight. I was overweight growing up, and it was the color of my skin. I grew up in an area where I wasn't surrounded by a lot of Indian people. And so those were the two reasons, except my mother didn't give me that advice. Sometimes I wish she did. My mother did the opposite. She actually came into my school and spoke to the teachers, which was really embarrassing at that age and, not helpful for my...
No, I think maybe it is. I had a similar thing. I went to Catholic grade school and high school. And in those days, you sat in alphabetical order. I was in the first row, Biden, 4 people down. And reading class, everybody read a paragraph. I got to my paragraph, and I remember what it was, because I used to try to memorize it rather than have to look at the word when I was rereading it. It said, "And he was a gentle man." And the teacher said, "What's that, Mr. Biden?" She wanted to say gentleman, but it was easier to not let her say gentleman. I said, "Gentleman." I said, "Mr. Biden, what is that?" And I got up and walked out and walked home, which was about 2 miles. And my mother was sitting there tapping the table when I walked in. She said, "Get in the car." Went down in the car. We walked in, went to the principal's office, sat me outside the door. The door was cracked. It was one of those opaque glass windows, and it didn't go to the ceiling. Anyway, to make a long story short, she said, "I'd like to speak to the teacher," my mother said. And she said, Mr. Biden, I said, I'd like to speak to the teacher. So the teacher walks in, looked at me like, you're in trouble now, Biden. Walked in, sat down. There was a crack in the door. I'll never forget this. And my mother, Catherine Eugenia Finnegan Biden, and she looked, and I could say, what did you say to my son? She said, did you say Biden? So I was just trying to make a point, Mrs. Biden. She said, if you ever do that again, I'll come back and rip that bonnet off your head. Do you understand me? Swear to God.
Wow.
Get up, walked out, go back to class, Joey. But, you know, it's everybody has something that is tough, particularly when you're younger. And it makes such a difference when somebody reaches out. I'm sure you also had some experience with someone say, come on. Like, for example, there's more than a handful of young stutterers, they're not so young anymore, that I still keep in touch with. It. One young kid introduced me when I ran for president. It took such courage because he talk like that, and he practiced and he practiced and he practiced, but it's had a profound impact on his life. Another young man, when I was vice president, he was, I could tell, you can tell a stutterer if you're a stutterer just by when he was in line with his mom, who was in Tennessee, and where I was doing a thing for Al Gore, and she introduced her son, and I could see him go, his lips. I said, hey, I'm about to finish my speech. Why don't you come help me write it? And the mother looked at me, and he looked at me, and took him in. I showed him how I marked up my speeches so that I could get a little cadence with what I did. Did you ever see the movie The King's Speech?
Yes, of course.
Well, the gentleman who had a copy of The King's Speech, sent me a copy. And I don't know if I have my book with me, but there's one of these days I'll show you my speeches. I looked at it and I marked it up the same way. Every speech I mark up is the same way.
I think they might have it.
See the slash marks I put on?
Yes.
Well, it's just to help me. But, you know, there were people who reached out to me too. Maybe that impediment was the best thing ever happened to me.
It's incredible, isn't it, how a challenge that you're going through actually helps you become more compassionate and empathetic towards other people.
It's kind of human nature for most people. When you understand the pain someone's feeling, your first instinct is, look, we have an expression in the family from the time I was a kid. It's all about showing up, to just being there. I mean, I imagine the times when you were down because they're making fun of your Indian heritage and an all-white population, that having someone come up and say, hey, come on, you and me, let's do, boom, makes a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll never forget. You've just reminded me. Ian Windes was his name. He was the toughest kid in school, and he had my back. That was that person that reached out to me. So if anyone had a problem with me, they had a problem with him, and he'd take care of it. I felt very safe. Felt very safe with Ian.
Well, it really is all about reaching out, isn't it? I mean, for real. Think of all the young people today. I think that there's more anxiety and loneliness today than there's been in a long, long time. You know my friend, I appointed him Admiral McMurthy. He was telling me about, you know, the percentage of young people today who are feeling lonely, alone. And sometimes it's just touching, just showing up. I used to get my deceased son, Bo, who should be sitting here instead of me, would always say, Dad, you don't have time to make that call. You don't. I'd get in a plane and go home, and because someone had a serious problem, lost a wife, a daughter, and he said, Dad, you don't have time. When he passed away, the hundreds of people have told me how he called, he showed up, he was there. And because there are people who showed up for me too. It just really matters.
Yeah.